Hello and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. As a reminder, the thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. To interact with us, we love seeing you live every Thursday night on Facebook and YouTube land. The chats are always fun, so if we can't get to all your comments, we apologize, but remember your comments may show up on the show, so keep that in mind. And finally, if you can't catch us live, catch us in the replay or in your favorite podcasting app. My name is John Ruark. I'm a past master of the Patriot Lodge, number 1957, in Fairfax, Virginia. Hey, Joe. How's it going?
Hey, you got through the intro without stuttering all over your lips. That's amazing.
Oh, just a little.
I am so proud of you. Hi, Joe Martinez. Let's see. Currently, Worshipful Master of Manassas Lodge number 182 in Manassas, Virginia. Member of Things and Stuff. And as always, damn glad to be here.
Woo!
Woo!
And special guest for this week.
Woo!
Someone we've never heard of before.
Woo!
Brother Chris Ruli, esteemed Masonic author, historian, and all-around awesome guy. Hey, bro.
Hey, everybody. How are you?
Great. Any other bios or plugs you want to get into?
Chris Ruli, Federal Lodge number 1 DC, AW22 in Virginia. Like Joe said, doer of things, participant of many activities. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Happy to have you.
An all-around swell guy.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
And swole. Not just swell, but swole.
Well, no, I don't think so.
Getting that creatine.
Still
shake.
time. There's still time, I guess.
Yes.
Let's
Never
do
say
it.
never. Today is the first day of the rest of your life. Just like for all of you patrons who support the show, thanks for your many years of continued support. Patreon.com/the Masonic Roundtable to support Masonic education and research
And research.
for the next 11 years.
Important.
Woo!
Till 2040, baby.
Till 2040. We're going to get there. We're going to get there one day.
We'll get there. I'll still be here. John will still be here. Ruli will still be here for sure.
That's true. He's a young.
I'll be here.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, cool.
We'll get there.
Even though Jason's not here, we usually transition over to
Tarot card of the week.
see.
Hate you.
Chris is a regular. He's an expert.
Hate you.
Long-time watcher.
Yeah.
5-time? I think this might be my
Yes.
5th or 6th time.
Woo!
I gotta get one of the punch cards. Don't I get like a
Punch
free sandwich or something?
Yeah.
After
free
or
Subway
5-timers
sandwich.
club? Where's the
Yeah.
5-timers club?
Yeah, you need like a smoking jacket with the number 5 on it.
We're working
It's-
on it.
It's in the mail.
Yeah. It's a smoking jacket and a body massage.
It's better than being a blue friar, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's more than a soggy chicken lunch. Crystal City, buddy. Let me promise you that it is homemade and full of love. You're creeping me out. Get
What
me
tarot cards do you have, Joe?
Oh, okay.
Speaking
Yeah.
of-
So I was like, why am I here? We are going to do one of my favorite decks, the Knapp Hall Tarot deck by J. Augustus Knapp and Manly P. Hall. So,
Woo.
yeah, this was the recreation. I don't have the original. Those are very rare. I think one of us have a copy of the original, right?
I don't know.
Is it RJ? I think RJ said he found the original deck, which is awesome. I would kill for that. But yeah, so but yeah, these are their original recreations from the original cards themselves. They're smaller than your
They're
regular.
original copies.
Yes, original copies and much less expensive
Yes.
than OG ones. Yes. So yeah, we're gonna do a little shuffle, see what we got here, and what we got. What is that? We got La Force, so strength.
Strength.
Nice.
All right.
Strength, yeah.
That's one of the easier ones to interpret there.
Yeah, totally.
So when you're doing Masonic research, you should have strength and persistence in order to pursue truth.
Conviction.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love it.
Very
Love
nice.
it. And Brother Chris is definitely a strong dude. He gets his workouts on. So
He's swole.
apropos,
That's right.
very swole.
Boy.
We've said that twice tonight. Swole.
Yeah.
If you say it enough, it must be true. It's a positive affirmation, just like the strength card, right?
Yes.
Strength to overcome any adversity. So yeah.
So deep.
Because knowledge is power, Jose says.
Look at that.
Yep. You know who said that?
Jose
Yeah.
Angel.
That's a quote. Go research. Love it. Love it. What else we got to talk about?
Well, Jose also had a good observation because we are on, ready for this? Episode 498.
Ooh, 498.
So for those who can count past your fingers and toes, that means we're closing in on episode 500. Can you believe it?
I can't.
Joe was just a wee little guy.
I was a wee baron.
So yeah, are we gonna do something special for 500? We probably should.
I think we should. Let me see if I can.
All right, that's it. It's official. We're doing something. What are we doing, Joe?
I don't know. Let me share my screen. Give me a minute. Use your
All
riff.
right, because we are gonna do something.
We are.
Look at that.
Well, so the stars have aligned, and we're actually all four hosts are going to be in the same place at the same time for the 500th episode. That was not planned; it just happened to work out that way. But yeah, John and Jason and RJ and myself, we will be together in the same place. So some of us and a bunch of our friends are coming in town for AMD's Masonic Week. So we thought we would take that Thursday and try to celebrate not just with ourselves, but with all of you. So episode 500 will be done live, even though we do every show live, but it'll be done live in Manassas, Virginia. So we're going to get a bunch of pizzas and get a bunch of soda pop and all those fun PG-13 things. And we are going to get together and open the doors and welcome you all in. So we'll have John and all of his amazing literature that he's written. And RJ, same thing. And then you got Jason and I, and we'll be handing out swag and talking over pizza. And yeah, anybody who wants to come, open to everybody. Don't have to be a Mason.
Yeah.
Just would love to hang out and meet folks. And again, if you're in town for Masonic Week, it is 30 minutes west of Crystal City.
Easy to find.
Very easy to find. And we're starting a little later with the pizza party than we would normally start a pizza party, since DC traffic can be a bit of a mess. So we're actually going to start the party at 8 p.m. and then we're going to go live on the air at 9:30 p.m. So yeah, it's on Facebook, it's on Insta.
At Manassas Lodge. Yep.
At Manassas Lodge, yeah, absolutely. The home of all cool things in this area, and which Chris has spoken at. And let's see, John's spoken at. And I think all four of our hosts have spoken at. So yeah, home of Esotericon.
You spoken at that lodge yet, Joe?
Have I? Probably more than I should. Yeah. So indeed, I think they're tired of me.
We can't get you to stop.
Joe,
No.
is there a particular program that for the recording? Is there a theme or something that you guys, or is that a teaser?
I'm going to defer to the ringmaster here on. So there is a theme. Yes.
There's a theme. And without
I've got
giving away too much
concepts of a
spoilers. Yes. Concepts of a plan include looking back over the past 11 years and then looking forward 11 years.
It's great.
And some surprises.
And special guests.
And special guests. Yeah.
And pizza.
And pizza. Mm.
Yeah.
So
again,
fun.
if nothing else, you can get a pizza out of it.
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited. That'll be fun. Be a lot of fun. Wait, pizzas. I thought pizzas were only for degree nights. This guy, Masons. All right. So before we get into Masonic research, we have huge late-breaking news. It's like the news to end all news, especially if you've been anywhere near Masonic internet over the past 48 hours or so, where it's been shared, confirmed, I'm not sure, that our very own President Biden was made a Mason at sight.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, like all things on the internet, it must be true. So that's when the internet sleuths start coming out. Where did this happen? What did we hear? And then how can we actually use Masonic research to fact check this to see if this is true? Hey, RJ, how's it going?
Hey, RJ.
Peace.
Howdy, howdy. Oh, you talking about this big controversy?
Yeah, brother.
Yeah.
Controversy?
Brother, President Biden. All right, so how did this come about? How did we find out about it? What did you guys hear?
Do we want the facts, or do we want what Masonic social media has been exploding about it?
So this is a perfect introduction because there's like what you've heard, and then what's true, and then you get into all these recognition things. Let's break it down. What did we hear? So just the pictures speak for themselves. We have a post that says
the flat out story was,
yeah.
Hey, President Joe Biden, former President Joe Biden, was made a Mason at sight by the Most Worshipful Grand Lodge, PHA, Florida.
South Carolina.
South Carolina.
Oh yeah, South Carolina. Yes, South Carolina. And then what? Everything just kind of. Then everybody was like, they did the same thing I did probably, which was, Illinois says that we recognize all Prince Hall Grand Lodges that are recognized by their constituent regular Grand Lodge. So for those people out there who are like, what does that mean? It basically means if you've got a regular Grand Lodge, like in your state, and I say regular, that's just a term we use, like the Grand Lodge of Texas or the Grand Lodge of California, if that state recognizes their Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of California, then all of a sudden we also recognize the PHA Grand Lodge of California. Or, the big one that happened a few years ago was the Grand Lodge of Oklahoma. Grand Lodge Oklahoma was for a very long time not in recognition of the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Oklahoma, which was a real bummer because the Prince Hall Grand Lodge Oklahoma chartered so many lodges, military lodges overseas. And I had guys from Illinois calling me up, and they were like, "Hey, RJ, can I visit this?" And I was like, "Who is it?" And they were like, "It's PHA Grand Lodge Oklahoma." And I was like, yeah, the official answer there is no.
Yeah. So, and that's what it comes down to, right? Because, okay, first thing you hear about a president being a Mason is like, cool, when can I sit and lodge with them? Right? And then the second question is, wait, can I sit and lodge with them? Right? It's the whole recognition thing.
Yeah.
Which, your Grand Lodge has different rules than, say, Virginia Grand Lodge.
Yeah. So for us,
you have the blanket recognition, sort of.
We looked it up, and like immediately it said that the Grand Lodge of South Carolina doesn't recognize the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of South Carolina.
Right.
So because of that, Grand Lodge Illinois won't recognize it either. Right. And the same goes for California and anybody else who has that rule.
So it's interesting, like here in Virginia, just to go on the recognition angle, we have to have point-to-point recognition. So we don't have any blanket things. And that means that we currently only recognize a couple of states, obviously the Virginia Prince Hall affiliated Grand Lodge, but then also I think Maryland, D.C., Alaska, for strange reason, but not South Carolina. So, which is interesting because I went and checked the old Amity app, which is a great thing that easily better than that list of lodges Masonic we used to have back in the day. And although the Grand Lodge of Virginia doesn't recognize the PHA Grand Lodge of South Carolina, our PHA Grand Lodge in Virginia does recognize the PHA Grand Lodge in South Carolina. So, yeah, it's an interesting tale we weave of diplomatic relations.
Yeah, and so I think the one thing that you got to crush right away is everybody going, "Oh, that's a clandestine Grand Lodge."
Right.
So no, it's not clandestine.
It's not clandestine.
It may be for you irregular,
right, and not recognized.
Yeah, but it was wild, man. So where do we end up on this?
Yeah, so how would you validate this, Chris? What would you do to check on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I got a couple of text messages, and I wasn't even, I'm not even joking. I got text messages, and like, I think one dude tried to call me like, are you checking your face? Something about Biden. And so I check, I go online and I saw it like everyone else did, which is really interesting. If you actually look at how it was presented, it is curious because It's not an official document. It was on a Facebook post. It was not from the Grand Lodge. It was from a conference of, if I believe that's right, it was from a conference of Prince Hall Grand Masters. So it wasn't like this was being posted onto the official website.
Yeah, no primary source, really. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so initially, my initial response is, okay, well, I'm initially hesitant or curious about this, because how many times do you get a Mason in Masonic regalia, even in front of the president at a meet and greet? But the photos look, accurate. The gentleman who was with the president of the United States was, Grand Master, I believe his name is Victor Major, who is the Grand Master of that jurisdiction. The preamble to the resolution was really interesting, because in the preamble, he mentions Master Mason. In the resolution, it just says that they're conferring, membership with full honors. I've never even heard of with full honors. Maybe that's a jurisdictional thing as well. And so it said it was a private ceremony. Well, if you look at, so I went and took a look at the president's official schedule. I went to Getty Images to see if we can pull images from that, and they're still not out yet, but we can certainly pull those eventually. Over time, we'll be able to do that. So, it said that there was a private ceremony where they conferred this event. Well, or this degree didn't appear on there. It didn't align with the schedule. So it seems like it was just the event actually happened during this, photo opportunity
Conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we don't know what happened. I mean, the way I sort of see it is, I don't really know. There's no documentation. I sort of go back and look at what happened with Taft. I think Taft is perhaps the best example we can use as a reference to this case. And so I'm surprised. Actually, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at how the public vitriol for what happened with Taft's initiation is very similar to what we're seeing with Biden's.
Interesting.
Where Taft, there was a lot of pushback in Masonic periodicals. There's a lot of stuff posted and published after Taft's initiation. Some jurisdictions said, hey, listen, we don't accept this. This is not a thing that we do in our jurisdiction. We don't consider Taft made a Mason. And there was also, that the Taft example is also curious because it was a lot more organized. They reached out to a lot of Grand Lodges. Representatives from different Grand Lodges went to Cincinnati to watch the event. The event was a little bit more organized and orchestrated. The president came to the Scottish Rite building. The Grand Master conferred the degrees. There was more of a conversation. There was a discussion about the degrees. They went through the grips and signs and words. And so, in that instance, Taft was made a Mason at sight. There was then this just public backlash on certain states. We don't accept this. This is still a degradation of, the Masonic degrees. It's a violation of land. So the same conversations we're hearing online right now. Well, I saw that 100, plus or close to 100 years ago when Taft was made a Mason at sight. And it speaks to, I think it speaks to this idea of, I think there's 3 or 4 different levels here. There's this idea of what happens when you initiate a public figure. You bring a public figure into the fraternity. Then there's that sort of lower level of, well, what about recognition and can I sit in lodge with him? And so to me, I'm not particularly concerned about the logistics of how do we make him a Mason or what does that mean? I'm very interested in how the public reacts or how the fraternity reacts to him becoming a Mason or being, made a Mason at sight. I don't know what the terminology is yet because we don't really know.
Yeah.
It's a curious thing.
Well, I mean, to your point, I think what's more striking to me is, or equally as striking is, how are those around him gonna react as well, right? Because we know former President Biden, we know his religious background, we know, where he grew up, where he comes from and stuff. And some of those things impact membership in an organization like ours. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I'm looking at the pictures and I'm like, was this really a ceremony or was this just like a photo op and somebody just started blasting?
I mean,
touched him,
you
so
know how many times,
How
many times have you had to meet somebody like at a meet and greet, and it's like so fast, right? Like, great example is, unless you're paying dollars, you go to a book signing and it's boom, boom,
Sure.
boom. We're at a
30
Comic-Con.
seconds.
Yeah.
30 seconds, maybe a minute.
Yeah. And so with a former POTUS who, I mean, literally either just got done or what, it doesn't matter.
He was technically present at that time. That was
The
one
last-
of
one of
his
his last
last
days.
day, or
Wow.
second to last day.
How
Yeah.
crazy that would be. I mean, the president's schedule is like, we've had episodes about, you know, our 24-hour schedule, like Ben Franklin, like the president's is the same and probably triple booked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine, right? Like if I were a grandmaster for a day and they were like, yeah, okay, Biden's got a 30-minute window. He's going to squeeze you in on his last day in office. You've got 10 minutes.
What other opportunity is there? Yeah, exactly.
So maybe, I mean, I just feel like if I were the grandmaster, I'd be like, okay, if I want to do this for whatever reason, I got a script. Boom, I'm going to read it. Done. Okay, cool. Handshake. See you later. Photo
Shoot
op.
your shot. Yep.
And then, you know, Biden, here's some information.
Here's a pamphlet.
Look us up whenever you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
A free can of green beans.
Yeah, I mean,
All right.
I think it certainly speaks to the fact that there needs to be a lot of consideration taken when you're bringing in a public figure like that, and regardless of who it is, I think especially in our day and age now, the fraternity has not had enough of those types of examples to go
Not in
through
this
the
generation.
process and the
Yeah.
motions. Yeah,
That is true.
So
that is true.
unfortunately, some people, you can see it online. You know, some people are like, oh, this is great. Some people are making political arguments. Some people are making non-political arguments. Some people are making emotional arguments associated to this. So to me, the best
Emotional
way to
Freemasons? What?
Yeah, I sort of
Okay.
step back and say, I'm going to wait. I'm going to, sort of wait until there's more information. There's more coming out of the Grand Lodge, from the Grand Master. So I think it's just always better to just hold on and see what comes out, see what official
Let the dust settle.
documentation.
Yeah.
Regardless, I have to say this, you know, I'm not saying which way I lean on this stuff, but everybody kind of knows I'm a bleeding heart liberal anyway. But I'll just say this. My favorite comment so far was, I saw a brother post recently, like a thank goodness Biden's out of office. And it was like a let's go Brandon post. And I wrote underneath it, brother Brand. No, somebody else wrote.
That's funny.
I was like,
Look at who you are. That's funny.
Anyway.
All right.
Really funny. But
Bringing it back in to tonight's
Moving on.
topic. Masonic Research. So
Yeah.
Jason did a good episode. You can go back and find it in the archives. Masonic Research 101. Kind of walking through, if you're brand new to you're brand new Mason, you want to learn how to put together a research paper or a presentation, some of the basic steps you need to do. We said, let's take that and run with it and go right to the source of some great wisdom and expertise of how to take it to the next level. And so I thought, who better than Brother Ruli to bring on and dive deep into Masonic Research. So would you consider to be Masonic Research?
Sure. Well, I think Masonic Research, at least the way that I would characterize it is the study of the origin, evolution, and the engagement of the fraternity, of its people, of its places, of its ideas. And so it's trying to understand how it works, how it engages, how it organizes itself, and how it interacted in the past. The people, the environments, the places, the ideas, how it evolved over time.
I like that. And what would you say are some of the best practices that you've kind of run into over the time as doing research for books, or just, how did you get into higher quality research, especially when you're trying to put not just presentations together, but actual no kidding academic style research?
Well, I think it comes from, I think everyone has a particular interest in the fraternity. And I think some people are very good ritualists. Some people focus on the mechanics of, I want to perform very good ritual because I want to practice it or I want to confer it on someone. So there are folks who are very good at the day-to-day logistics, the secretary, the treasurer. Let's get these bills paid. What do we, what's the travel situation like? Let's bring in a speaker. There are guys that are interested in the I would call more esoteric, non-Masonic. Masonry opens the door to bring people into this esoteric topics, but then they dive in and check out other things. I think for me, I was interested in the research because I found it the most applicable to my background. So, coming from a background of academia, coming from a background of research, professionally, I'm a statistician. And so to me, numbers, math, publishing stuff was just part of my job. And so I took a look at, when I joined Freemasonry, and then a couple of years afterwards, I took a look at what what Masonry or Masonic research looked like. What was research in our specific sphere? And I noticed that common names, frequently a group, it tends to be a small group of guys that are doing Masonic research. And so I sort of split it into three different groups, three different categories. And perhaps you guys can, respond to these based on these three different groups. And so to me, I sort of bucket this when I see Masonic research, or when I see stuff coming over my way, or, as editor of the Plumb Line, which is the Scottish Rite Research Society's publication, I just, I get people send me stuff. They ask, hey, can you just take a look at this? I sort of bucket these into three groups. The first group is people who are interested in, who produce, who find, who publish new and novel information about a person, about an institution, about a ritual, about a concept or something, right? So they have like a biography on a Mason, they have a lodge history, or a history about a Masonic body or a Grand Lodge. They have new published, like a diary or just something that's completely new. And this new thing helps us understand a part of Masonic research or a part of history or Masonry. The second bucket tends to be an update or a review or an addition to existing work. So in the first example, it's like, here's new ritual on a new Masonic body that we haven't seen in 200 years. I'm going to publish that. In the second example is, here is a new diary we found of a prominent Mason. Let's say there's a historical society in Louisiana, and they have a diary of Albert Pike that has not been published. And so there are people that try to find stuff that adds to what exists. They find new letters, they find new documents, they find updated rituals, or perhaps they're reviewing rituals and they're reviewing stuff, they're adding to stuff. And then there's this third bucket, which I call sort of perspective or comparative analysis. And it's, we take things that already exist in Masonic research and we try to compare it, analyze it, review it. So I don't have anything new to share, but I'm going to provide you a research paper that's based on, Albert Pike's commentary on XYZ, or here's a topic from Albert Mackey on jurisprudence. And so I have some ideas. Let's pull in stuff from different fields and different academic, themes, and I'll try to create something new from that. And so I find, and again, this is just my general observation, that they fit in those three categories. New stuff that's never been seen before, never been published before, stuff that's sort of like an update. You're bringing new stuff in. There's new information out there from different sources, and you want to present that material. And then there's that third bucket of like, this is not necessarily new, but I'm re-looking at it. We're reanalyzing it. We're rethinking about it. And so those are those three buckets.
No, I think that's a great categorization of, like I said, your definition of what Masonic research is, and then kind of the flavors that you can get. And that could be in anything from symbols to biographies to history to whatever, but right. I still think all of those apply. That's a really cool classification. So thank you.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead, Joe.
No, you go first.
Okay, fine. Chris.
Yes.
The third bucket is probably the bucket that I would guess you have the most contributions or submissions for. Okay. And this is because everybody's like, they're reading what's already existing, and maybe guys don't have access to all these original works, so they're not flying back over to Europe and checking stuff out or whatever the case is. And so because of this, we've got a ton of things that get looked at, and maybe this new interpretation, and maybe they think they're groundbreaking, and yet there's 100 guys who have said the same thing over the years, and these guys just aren't as well read. My question for you is, in the way of Masonic research goes, how and what does Masonic research look like in that third category?
Yeah, so I'm so glad you mentioned that, RJ. I think the third bucket is the easiest for people to get into.
Sure.
It also is, by definition, I think the most difficult to be a part of, because it's sort of like you are going into a field where Albert Mackey has talked about this stuff for 100+ years, or whoever. I'm just picking Mackey because that's just the first person that came on my top of my head. And so you are now getting into an argument where everyone's going to use the same sources, the same, and everyone's just regurgitating the same kind of thing. And it's the same topic on the same discussion.
Well, you're assuming that Masons read, so that's
a good point. So, but here's the other thing is, though, because it's the easiest to get into, it is by definition the hardest to be a part of, because you have to consume so much material. You have to read up on, what's, there's new stuff it seems like every year. I mean, Art de Hoyos and Joe Wade just came out with that Stephen Moran book, a very good book chronicling that, that early Scottish Rite history. Well, if you didn't know where that stuff was, or if you didn't know about that information, you didn't know where to go. So I don't fault a person for not knowing where that material is. But now that book is now in the sphere, in the Masonic sphere, people are going to talk about it. There's going to be articles about it. There's going to be discussions and dissertations on it. There's going to be people adding to it or countering it and discussing it. So I find that third bucket is, by definition, really difficult to figure out. And the easiest answer, or probably the answer that people don't want to really realize, is you got to do a lot of work. You got to go through AQC. Yeah. And we didn't talk about this yet, but it's about primary resources. You got to go through these resources and find the stuff that works versus the stuff that doesn't work. It took me years to figure out that Mackey's encyclopedia, I shouldn't be using Mackey's encyclopedia. I should be using Cole's encyclopedia, because that's a better version of the encyclopedia. Mackey made a lot of mistakes in his encyclopedia, but it went through me realizing, oh, this isn't accurate, or Brent Morris or Art de Hoyos or another esteemed like Pete Norman telling me, Chris, what are you doing? Don't use this. You got to use this resource. This is a better resource because X, Y, Z. So I think the third bucket is the most difficult bucket to get through when you're creating Masonic research. And there are people that live. See, I try to live in the first two buckets. I'm not interested in getting into discussions or arguments with people over the word that was used in this French ritual, sure, and then it was translated into this German ritual. Mm-hmm. I'm not interested in that, because I just don't find that intellectually stimulating. What I do, though, is
doesn't mean it's any better or worse. It's just not your bag. Exactly,
not my cup of tea. But what I did for the White House and the Freemasons book was, I loved going into newspapers. I loved going into old diaries and documents and trying to find primary sources, and then compiling something and creating something like the White House and the Freemasons. To me, that was more in that second bucket of what is out there in the world. I recognize that there's missing pieces to this. So let's create something or update something that already exists.
I think that's fascinating. I mean, just thinking about, when I think about you, what you mentioned, like you're a statistician. Mm-hmm. So because of that, not to say you have no interest in what I might call etheric, right? Like, sure, the cold hard facts can tell a compelling, super interesting page turner, right? And I think you did that. I mean, the chat rolling alongside this in the YouTube comments, everybody's blowing it up, like talking about how, you know, baller Chris Ruli is for his work on this book. But you know, it's awesome. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's something that the listeners really should pay attention to is if you've got a specific flair or a fire for something, you can follow that.
Yeah.
And like Chris, you know, he's talking about, he's the editor of the Plumb Line. And before you, right, was Adam Kendall.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I talked to Adam a couple of weeks ago, actually. But the thing is like, I would talk to him and he would tell me about wild stuff that people get.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you too. And I mean, like, I can't imagine what that's like. You know, we're talking about Masonic research and something like the Plumb Line, maybe. You have to have a certain amount of professionalness to it.
Mhm.
I don't want to say like, well, it probably is AQC, you know, it's the style. I mean, you guys are putting out some intense stuff. Do you guys work with people when they send you things?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
like
let's talk
maybe
about
it's not a-
style. Like
not-
Sure.
how letter perfect and syntactical and cited does something need to be
So
in
so if
general
you're-
and in SRS particular?
Yeah, and so I think let's take a step back and recognize that we're again in this list format. The way that I see this stuff is that there are local, I sort of call them like community colleges. To me, a community college is like a research lodge. Your Grand Lodge has a research lodge. That to me is a community college. Then you go up one step, which is an association or university. So I call them like the big three, which is like a university, like an Ivy League university. You'd have AQC, you have the Scottish Rite Research Society, and you have Philalethes. I consider these bodies places where people go to find research. And so if you're interested in doing Masonic research, you can go to your local research lodge or a Grand Lodge or whatever research body that you have that's either managed by the Grand Lodge or funded or whatever. Then you can go to these three institutions, these big three groups, and you can find and pull information. If you are a serious Masonic scholar, if you are interested in understanding either through ritual, history, biography, whatever, I think it's a requirement. You gotta be involved in these three bodies. You gotta have membership in these three bodies. So that way you can pull the primary resources. You can get the old copies of Herodom, you can
That's
get the
fair.
old copies of Plumb Line, you can get the old copies of AQC. Now, fortunately for AQC, some of that older stuff is in the public domain. You can pull it online, you can phone it from their website. But to me, you got to become a member because that way you can get all those old resources or access to those old resources. You can Philalethes, I think you pay $30 or $40 extra to get the entire back catalog, a digital version of the back catalog. That's amazing. You've got 100 plus years of research that's there. Scottish Rite Research Society, they always putting out, bonus books and all that stuff. And so you always get access to that. To me, when someone says, I want to start Masonic research, where do I go? I say, start at the local level, start at the research or your research lodge level, see
Right.
what they have there, and then go up to the AQC, go up to the Scottish Rite Research Society, go up to the Philalethes. If you're going to be at Masonic Week, go to the Masonic Week Philalethes events, participate, meet the guys. You will find, you mentioned Adam Kendall. Adam and I speak every week. We talk every week. We talk about non-Masonry, we talk about life, we talk about our work. And so when someone submits a paper for consideration, Adam and I go through it very quickly. We find the common, the pitfalls, and I think someone in the chat mentioned quarry style. What we look for is very simple. It's actually like a checklist. It's a mental checklist. Number one, does the person have references? Do they include footnotes or endnotes? Number two, are they using appropriate footnote or endnotes? Not just a Wikipedia page.
My past master said, yeah.
Right. It's not a Wikipedia page. It's not, it's a good, has the person who's explained this provided something that is helpful? And then number three, the way they write, are you communicating effectively? Are you consistent in your writing? Are you following a style guide that AQC shares or the Scottish Rite Research Society shares? So there's a couple steps in that process. And I'm happy to stop here and reiterate or go back to some points. But I think to answer your question, RJ, again, when you reach out to us or when you reach out to someone you want to publish a paper, there's usually style guides and references that you have to or you should absolutely look at. And by the way, you could send a paper to us for us to take a look at it.
Just to get a first
there's
pass.
nothing wrong.
Yeah,
absolutely nothing wrong with it. And then I can go, okay, well, I see where you're making an argument here, and maybe you should take a look at this guy's writing or this guy's writing.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because, there's this impression of once you get to that next level of, I just spoke about George Washington in my local lodge.
Sure.
There is a barrier to entry almost of some of these higher level research lodges, like you said. And it could be intimidating, right? These could be brothers who've never really done this stuff for the first time. And so I'm glad you said that out loud, that you could, hey, just send me what you've got and I can point you in the right direction and give you that little bit of help to steer you that way. Because again, some of these guys, aren't, is it like Chicago style or MLA style citations Chicago. And all that? There's religious wars over that, right? So it's good to have someone like you to help.
Chris, since this is 202 or 201, rather, we're talking about some advanced stuff.
Yeah.
What is the style guide? You said Chicago. Is that what you guys use?
So Chicago is used by, I believe, and I don't know if Sean is here, but Chicago is the style guide that we use for the Scottish Rite Research Society. There was a project called the Quarry Project done a while back.
I
certainly
forgot about that.
And the Quarry Project, it uses Turban, which is a form of Chicago. Joe is familiar with it. And it basically, and you can find it online, the Quarry Project. There's a great guide, and you'll notice how people write, how the references are supposed to be formatted, and when to capitalize Mason, all that stuff. Use Chicago. You over, and I'm telling you, anyone who's listening, over reference, over cite. If you find one source, that's great. If you can find a secondary source, that's great too. Okay, this is a 201, as you said. So what is a primary resource versus what is a secondary resource? What is a tertiary resource? Perfect. This is the project guide. And you'll notice that it's still online. McCoy uses it. Different publishing houses may use it. And so, it's a good thing to use. When we're talking about primary resources, we're talking about the individual who experienced this, wrote down their experiences. That's a primary resource. A lodge minute book is a primary resource because it's captured by the people who experienced it. The diaries, letters of correspondence, that is a primary resource. We consider those primary resources. A secondary resource is when the next person away from that primary person is recording that information. So a lodge historian, the publication of the lodge history is technically a secondary resource. The primary resource is the lodge minutes where the history occurred.
Nice.
But the secondary resource is the lodge history. And why is that the case? The person is imperfect. I could go through hundreds of thousands of pages of minute books and go, I'm not really sure we should highlight this one evening in a lodge minute, so I'm not going to cover it in the history. Well, now you've made an editorial decision. You've decided, we're not going to cover this. And so editorial or Masonic histories tend to be slightly biased. They're going to say, Masonry ebbed and flowed during the Morgan affair, and these places shuddered, but the spirit of Masonry prevailed. Well, let's take a look at the actual minute books and tell me if Masonry prevailed during that time. And so again, you have a primary resource, which is the people who actually went through it, reported it. You have a secondary resource like a lodge history. I'm trying to think, like a newspaper clipping, because a newspaper clipping, unless it's pulling from that direct source is basically some guy observing the event. It's not a primary resource, but in certain cases it could be. And then a secondary resource, or tertiary resource is like an encyclopedia. It's a reference guide. It's a different resource that people use. Most people can't figure out the difference between a primary resource and a secondary resource, or they will reference the secondary resource and go, well, wait a minute, this, this lodge history is the only thing we have. Well, actually, your minute books, if you still have them, those are your primary resources. So we always try to say, get us to the primary resource, get as close to the primary resource as you can without any, nuclear reaction. A joke went woof like that. Joe,
I laughed inside. Yeah,
thank you.
I was waiting for RJ to cut me off again. So yeah. So going back to the 3 buckets, because I did have a question on that, and it kind of dovetails into this part. Sure. Now I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what you are talking about in general is skewing more towards, if we're talking about historical or fact-based research, right? The 3 buckets. Is that fair to say? Because the next question I would bring you is, does that 3rd bucket, does it include interpretation?
Like symbolism?
Yes, perception. Yeah,
right. So, and that's kind of where I was going with that was, we have this large corpus of Masonic literature that is not focused on history, whether this thing happened or how it happened or what date it happened, but these are my personal interpretations that I try to back with research, and I'm using air quotes for the folks on Spotify and all our other audio apps. So my question is, how someone who wants to do real research when it comes to interpretive or subjective material, everybody says, symbols mean many things to different people and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So how does one balance research when it comes to interpretation or experiential Masonry versus historical or fact or targeted based?
Yeah. I mean, it's really funny because I got into Freemasonry through Manly P. Hall. So I'll let you spit out, what are you talking about?
What are you talking about?
Exactly. I got into it because I was not a Mason at the time. I was interested in esoteric stuff. So I knew about Hermes Trismegistus before I even became a Mason. But here's the thing. What my interest came from, I was interested in the primary resource. And so back to your point, Joe, my argument is I think every bucket is just as valid as the other ones. So if your interpretation, look what is an op-ed piece? What is a perspective piece? It's it's someone's interpretation.
An editorial, right?
An editorial, absolutely. And so to me, if you are able to, the goal in Masonic research is to present something new based on evidence and facts and everything that you can have to present it. And so to me, a perspective is just you attempting to find something new or present something new that has never, or at least should have never been done before. If it's been done before, then you really should find something else. But it's all about primary resources. So fine, take your example. Well, I want to then, if you're going to pick something, I don't know, Hermeticism, find those primary documents. Find reprints of those original documents if you can't get them.
Right.
And then base your research on those primary documents. So don't go off of what Mackie was talking about. Go and find, if you're able to, find those primary documents, find scholars who are talking about those primary documents, and then start your research from there. Don't necessarily start with tertiary.
So I shouldn't start with like the 2019 edition of the Kabbalion? I shouldn't start there?
I mean, if the 2019 edition includes the bibliography and the bibliography provides you the primary resources, then go to the primary resources.
It's so funny. It's like when someone sends me a Wikipedia link, I just go straight to the bottom. I just go right to the references.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
I don't want to see someone's summary or again, translation of that. Yep.
I think the best sort of compliment I ever got was when I hand Brent Morris a copy of your latest book. And the first thing he'll do is go through your bibliography. He's not going to go through the book. He's going to go through the bibliography and see what sources did you use? What primary sources? How are you communicating? it really is an art. Masonic research is sort of like an art itself. It's an art form where here's what you do versus here what you don't do. Here's what I've learned through a process of experimentation and failure, and you get to that point.
Mr. Martinez.
Question, Dr. Ruli.
Yeah.
So, I'm watching the chats and people are talking about like hermeneutics and things like that and original sources. So, let's go back to the interpretation bit and
Yeah,
using the lens of history, right? So,
sure.
this is a historical comment, not a religious comment, right? So, let me just throw that out there.
Okay, sure.
Lots of people talk about certain volumes of sacred law, shall we say,
Sure.
in the lens of research that we're talking about. We've got biblical scholars on TikTok. Everybody's got guys like Dan McClellan and stuff like that, who people love to listen to and read and stuff like that. I'm a big fan of him. But what do you do with things like that when we're talking about like the source material is a work of
That's a good
work
question.
that's been around for in different forms over thousands of years, right? Like when we say, so if I say, hey, I want to do, just pulling something out, research on the sprig of acacia and biblical references to it for use in Masonic symbolism. I think that's the one that Jason talked about, all those years ago.
Sure.
And let's look at, okay, so if I want to look at biblical references, I'm going to look at the Bible.
Sure.
How do I define, without being subjective,
Which one?
what that primary source is, right? And I'm not even talking about
which translation.
I'm talking about,
well,
do we go to the Christian Bible? Do we go all the way to the Tanakh? Like,
I think there's a good paper. I think there's a good paper in doing a comparative analysis of a Greek Orthodox iteration of the Bible versus a Western, a Catholic version or the King James Bible. I mean, there you can sort of slice and dice it the way you want to do it. I think the first step, honestly, the first step is to see what has already been published on the topic.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever I'm working on any paper, and right now I'm working on actually a paper on this really interesting event that happened before the Chinese the Chinese Communist Party came into China, where the Scottish Rite was performing initiation, 4 to 32nd degree, in an old the emperor's palace throne, a throne room or a throne space. Not a lot of research on it. I found it online, and so I've been digging into it. How did I start? Well, I started by looking at, has anyone written on this before? Has there been any Asian or East Asian studies professors that wrote on this stuff? And so what I did was I looked at something called Hathi Trust. Hathi Trust is a consortium of academic universities and libraries. They put all of their public domain scanned books into this one place. And you can log in and access the Hathi Trust, as well as other similar consortium databases, using an old university email address if you still have it. And so what my argument to you would be, well, go see what has been written out on this topic first and see how they've applied that topic, how they've argued that topic. In many cases, that third bucket also has the most amount of information out there available, because people always write this kind of stuff. They write it in local lodge histories. They write it in research lodges. They write it for Philalethes. I'm not sure. Herodom is too relatively young compared to the other journals, but they might be something on AQC. So I would start with AQC. I would start with these journals and look at the bibliography and say, someone's written about this. Let me look at their bibliography. Let's see where they went from it, and then start from there. And if it is completely new, if there's nothing within Masonic's sphere about it, then you have a good shot because it's new. But you got to find a way of articulating it well enough where you're making your points clear.
All right, so I got a hot topic.
Hot topic. Great store.
AI.
Perhaps. Yes.
For Masonic Research.
AI. Okay. So I'm writing an article or a post or something for the Plumline, for the next Plumline. I do not use AI for Masonic Research.
Get out.
Just it's a
outta
garbage
here.
in, garbage out issue. And so here's
But
the problem.
these have been large language models that have been trained by experts that have pulled from multiple
Yes.
anonymous, unknown sources.
Yes.
So
but here's-
whatever I get is going to be amazing, right?
No. So here's the problem. There's a garbage in, garbage out theory. Number one, language models like ChatGPT are not allowed to produce and export and tell you Masonic rituals. So if you go on and say, "Can you please tell me?"
It's amazing.
The Louisiana Masonic ritual is. It will say no because it's a secret society or a society or fraternity, and we do not export that information because we don't have digital records of all of the proceedings and of all the records and of all the rituals uploaded into the system. You are inherently dealing with incomplete data. You are inherently
Correct.
completing
Right.
with information
Yep.
missing or incomplete information. You are also, unfortunately, the system does not discern anti-Masonic, anti-fraternal,
Or just wrong.
anti-whatever behavior.
Right.
Right. And so it will also feed that system and feed that information and provide that response to you. So I do know that there, I think Joe Wages and a couple other guys are working on a model that pulls in.
See, that's what I'm
fraternal
fascinated
stuff.
about. So that's a side project I've had kind of running on my laptop for a while, where depending on what you're trying to do, to actually feed in and have some sort of retrieval augmented generative database that plugs into a large language model, that you can actually query your own source data.
Yeah.
Which is different than trusting whatever,
Yeah.
OpenAI scraped off the internet somewhere.
Yeah.
But putting your own, basically training it on your own source data.
But you also got to realize that, and I'm sorry, Joe, I'll just, if you don't mind, you also got to realize that if you go into the Hathi Trust, if you go into these databases, the Count Calistrago, by the way, the Count Calistrago library has 70, 80, 90,000 PDFs of different things that's available for free online. The system is fantastic. I'm so glad that we have it for Masons to do Masonic research. But if you looked at all the periodicals, all the things that are uploaded into that system, stuff that's published in 1860, 1870, some of that stuff is incorrect, or it's wrong, or it's
Correct.
factually, there's a bias associated to it. So again, there's this deep inherent garbage in, garbage out idiom or maxim that's involved with large language models. It should not be used. And so take this for example. The Jimmy Carter situation. When Jimmy Carter died, someone went into the system, ChatGPT in a different system, and pulled out. That. I think Chris Hodap, covered it in his blog as well. Of like, these language models are saying that Jimmy Carter was a Mason. Why did they find that?
Completely
because
false. Yeah.
They found photographs of him becoming an honorary Shriner. And then they created this fake lodge. I forgot the Taco Lodge or something in Georgia that does not even exist. It's not even in the record. But imagine someone who's not a Mason quickly going on ChatGPT and saying, "Was Jimmy Carter Mason?"
There it is.
All of a sudden, there's data there. So unfortunately, we don't have time to work the system and to get ChatGPT in a system where it works. We are dealing with inherently incorrect, wrong, out-of-date information. And so that's why I consider the large language models.
I'm challenging the Scottish Rite Research Society to stand up its own trained LLM on its own source data.
Who has time?
You've got the time, brother Chris Ruli, and money. You've got both.
Well, that's the rub, right? And I just wanted to sprinkle some sprinkles on the AI conversation because I think Chris said something really important. There's a big difference between black box LLMs, right? Where it's like ChatGPT, right? It's garbage in, garbage out. I completely agree with that. Back to your point, John, though, when you have a closed system LLM where you know exactly the data that you're feeding in, and it could be smaller, it could be voluminous,
right,
you will get different behaviors as a result of that, right? So not to say that I disagree with Chris that no, you can't ever use ChatGPT or something similar if you are curating the data that goes into it. But the problem, whether it's closed system or, black box and out in the world where it's just sucking in Wikipedia pages all day, the big difference is there's no there's no peer review process when it comes to the input that's going into the brain that you're teaching, right?
Yeah.
So there's, just like you said, it could be something from 150 years ago. It could be in a published Masonic document, but it's garbage and it's crap.
Source
and it's wrong.
bias. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I think
Go ahead. Sorry.
I think it's just also interesting when we think about certain topics within Masonry. I think this is all relevant and on point. However, Masonry as in itself is, one might say, a philosophical organization, and the philosophies that are based on it are not secret. And actually, many brothers that I know have actually used ChatGPT to build arguments and presentations around philosophies that are inculcated within Masonry. And I think to that extent, you're dealing with an acceptable amount, provided somebody is actually, they're going through it and they're reading it and they're sort of checking it, because you have to, right? It's a tool, not
Right.
auto do it.
Right.
So I think bear in mind that, but like you guys said, I mean, regardless of what we're using it for, right now, I think, what is the tool that Outlook provides right now? It's
I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Shoot, we just
Copilot?
got our job.
Copilot. Yes.
Copilot. Yes. Yeah.
Copilot is pretty on point with how it decides it wants to interact with you. Like
Right.
it says, hey, give me an idea what you want to write about, and let's start you off with a little inspiration.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's really interesting. I mean, I've heard a number of professionals in the business world on a ton of different podcasts that I listen to talk about this idea that no, AI doesn't do our job for us, but because of the way it can inspire us with ideas, it kickstarts processes that normally would have taken brainstorming 2 to 3 weeks. They're doing it in an hour, 2 hours.
Yes.
So it has its place. But as
Right.
you said,
So
you really have to be careful.
Right
So
tool for
RJ
the job.
So
Mhm.
RJ, I emphatically agree with you on that process, because what we were talking about is, do I use ChatGPT as a alternative to Masonic Research? No. But what you can do, and which I've done, and I use it almost every day for my work, and I applied it to Masonic Research, is I will ask ChatGPT, how many other arguments can I make for this point? Or am I missing something? And it will spew back, hey, Chris, did you consider XYZ, or did you consider this? And I'll go, oh, okay, I did not consider this. This helps me as a tool. Like you said, it helps me sort of work through the logic that I may have forgotten, or, perhaps sending something to peer review. It will peer review for me first and go, by the way, did you mention this, or did you consider this? And then I, as the person who's receiving that information, I make the determination at that point. I go, is this worth reconsidering, or do I just not listen to ChatGPT at this point? That's where you hold the power as the person who submits the prompt. But I think the ChatGPT, like you said, can provide feedback that you then can take to strengthen a Masonic paper, or perhaps something that you didn't consider, or argument that you didn't think about, because you're leveraging this large language model. Great point. That's a great point. One of the things that I guess we didn't talk about, and one of the things that I think people conflate, Bob Cooper, I had a chat with Bob Cooper a couple weeks ago about this, and he sort of turned my lights on about this. I'd never thought of it this way, but I really appreciate it. Bob Cooper says, or at least the way that we're talking about it, is there's a two worlds problem in Masonic research. We are siloed in Masonic research versus academia. People think we're writing papers for academia. We are not writing papers for academia. What is an academic? An academic is someone who receives, funds to provide this research. They have resources, and so they sort of operate in a different sphere. What is Masonic research today in the United States? It's not academic. It's not in the same scope as academia. We don't have a peer review board. You know, the peer review is the people you send it to AQC, or you send it to Scottish Rite Research Society, or you send it to, you know, Sean Iyer at the Philalethes, and he may know someone. Hey, Chris, you know, we got a paper on the presidency of the United States. Can you just quickly review it? There's no structure. There's no formal structure. And so when people come to me and say, hey, Chris, isn't this paper ready to be, maybe I can publish this in a natural history, or in, you know, an American Journal of American History. You know, one of the things I say is, this is a completely different, there's two different worlds.
Yeah.
You got to talk to the editor of that journal, see what they're coming from. And I think there is, and maybe this is a discussion for a different time, but there are inherent issues there. Do you as Masonic scholars know what academia is publishing on Freemasonry?
Right.
I would argue 98% of Masons do not know what Marcia Keith out of California or some folks out of Boston or Georgia or are publishing on Freemasonry. But isn't that important? Because there are scholars out there right now, and this is the two worlds issue. There are scholars on Freemasonry right now publishing papers on Freemasonry, and Grand Lodges, research bodies don't know what they're publishing. They don't have copies. They don't have access to purchase these journals. It's not on, or perhaps it's on JSTOR, if you're familiar with what JSTOR is.
Oh, wow.
But people
JSTOR.
Don't know. Think about it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
There's
think about
an entire
explosion.
field.
The explosion
Go
of the 1721, 717, or 1717 argument, right? Those were academics
Yeah.
going into this, and
That was
you know,
fun.
they published some research that shook up some people.
Yeah,
as
but
well.
but right now in the world right now, there are universities, centers of higher learning that have academics who are publishing about Freemasonry, and I would argue that very few academics or very few Masons are seeing what they're writing,
Right.
that are contributing their stuff to those papers or journals, because we live in this, I just really need to publish a lodge history. Okay, but there's stuff out there that's being published and we haven't, you know, it's sort of this black abyss in the background. We don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
But it's out there.
That's interesting. Yeah, it all depends on your circle of knowledge and your circle of interest.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. We could talk about this and AI
Yeah, I'll
forever,
stop.
but I think this is a great breaking point to wrap it up. And we'll start with Joe with the question, like, what inspires you? What gets you jazzed up and excited about Masonic research, especially at the 201 level?
I would have to say for me, first of all, always a pleasure to have Brother Chris on. He freaking rocks, and he knows I love him. And he inspires me to get off my butt and do stuff. But no, for me, I think because everybody here knows the slant that I take when it comes to writing about Masonry and talking about Masonry, and you know, for me that fills my cup. But I think for me, finding new sources for information which 100 years ago maybe wasn't that prevalent, or interpretations of things, and all of a sudden, you know, guys like Art de Hoyos and Brent and Joe are writing things. It's like, oh no, they've been saying this for actually 200 years. It's just, you know, it's been tucked away here, it's been hidden here, or it was only presented in this jurisdiction, kind of thing. I really like that, where it starts to bubble up this really niche interpretations of Freemasonry that were commonplace in the past that are no longer now because of whatever reason, right? Topic for another show. But yeah, when we find new niche information about Freemasonry and all the different aspects of it, that's exciting stuff. So boom.
That gets your goat. Awesome. How about you, RJ? What inspires you about Masonic research?
You know, I love looking at how the craft has changed. And so part of the 201 element of this is being able to take the extra time to sort of really evaluate, not just reading, say, some edict from a Grand Master from 1890. It's looking at why they did that, and then the grander social attitude outside the fraternity in the world and how it existed in those times. I'm very interested in those kinds of things because this fraternity has always maintained that we inspire, that we make the world a better place through our works by making good men better and all of these things. And yet what I find very interesting and what I do through my Masonic research a lot of the time is looking at social change and moral values and things and how those are sort of either you can find evidence that they were started perhaps by certain social attitudes or clubs that were started by Masons in an area, or even just looking more broadly at how the society and Masonry have gone along through the centuries. And this is all the kind of stuff that I live for. I love learning about these things. And Chris, thank you for being such an advocate for this. Adam did a tremendous job with Plumline. I know he's super happy to have you do this. There's probably nobody better to do it right now. So, and for all the work that you're doing on this, your current presentations, but also the White House and Masons book is exceptional. So,
which is now obsolete. Just to let you know.
That's right.
Well, we don't know, right? You're gonna have.
We don't know.
You know what you're gonna do?
Revised and expanded.
That's right.
We're just gonna put up a GoFundMe or a Kickstarter, and
GoFundMe.
Send you all like I don't know, like a one of these old things. Like you're just gonna rip the thing off and then
stick it in the back.
Slap it inside your current
Love
copy.
it.
It's the bonus track.
There you go.
Yeah,
That's right.
It's the epilogue.
That's right.
You're killing him.
So you're the man.
Thank you.
Brother Chris, thank you so much as always.
Yeah.
I loved your framework of how you thought through the different types and the styles. So thank you for sharing that. Any final words, any plugs for the Scottish Rite Research Society or anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I do want to answer your question about what you're excited about. I think we've all been lied to about Freemasonry. I think we all came in, or at least I did, certainly, and many Masons that I'm familiar with, came into thinking certain things about the fraternity, things that we thought were true or what we were told. And what's exciting is with the advent of technology, with the advent of more digital sources available going online, we as Masonic researchers can come out and start to really see that things aren't the way that we were taught, which is exciting. We can start to create our own research. We can create books like The White House and the Freemasons. We can create books like Brother Lafayette that are starting to really catalog and do the primary work to help people rethink how we were taught about Freemasonry. And how I know that's the truth or that's the case is I look at stuff from 150 years ago when we're having the same arguments about Taft. We're having the same arguments about the fraternity. Are we diluting the fraternity from bringing these people in or different people in? Are we diluting all these arguments that you see on social media, which, by the way, all those arguments we had on social media, we had the same arguments in newspapers, the original social media. So to me, it's exciting. The field of Masonic research is there. And I think when people say, well, how do I start? I say start by scanning and printing and creating a Masonic history of your local lodge, because that information is going to be very helpful to you or to someone in the future. Your local historical society, your state's research body, they are desperately looking for that type of information because they don't have it. And so, you have to take a step back and unlearn what you were taught, that this stuff is secret and we shouldn't be sharing this. Because I can show you 150 years ago where they were creating published histories and they were sharing this information, and they created this vast network of educated Masons and an educated public to understand Freemasonry. And so I think the people who are researchers right now, the generation after, as some of these older titans of Freemasonry of research, like Brett Morris, are retiring, there's an opportunity for guys like me. There's an opportunity for guys like Adam Kendall, Sean Iyer, some of these guys to put this stuff out there. And I think there hopefully are people watching this who will also share that. And with that, I thank you all as always for allowing me a couple minutes to chat about the stuff I really like to talk about.
You forgot to point at the camera. And you
too,
you too can be a Masonic researcher.
And of course,
awesome.
You may now flip. That was Larry Sanders reference.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Next slide.
Yeah.
Okay. No. Again, thank you so much, Brother Chris, for coming back on. It's always a pleasure, and love sharing your someone of like mind. So you're always welcome.
See you all perhaps at Masonic Week, maybe.
Maybe at TMR 500.
Maybe at 500.
Yes.
Okay, let's do this thing. Yeah, I like what you said. A couple things come to mind. First thing, I have demitted from my research lodge, or a couple of research lodges, because I started to see more of the type 3. The one is just like, well, I copied and pasted from other sources, and this is kind of my analysis. And while interesting, it didn't catch me as a research topic. It came as a good educational topic, but not so much of a research topic. And so I got to be a little disillusioned over time. Not to say anything against the brothers, but just, I was expecting a little bit higher quality. And so that's where I started, joining the Scottish Rite Research Society and others to try and get a little bit more new information. Because that's another lens that I look through this stuff. And again, we're not expecting every brother in the world to be a Masonic expert or, find something brand new and dig through the archives, of hundreds of years of Masonic history. But one diagram comes to mind. I saw a picture years ago, that talks about as members or people are trying to get their PhD, right? The goal is not to become an expert in everything. It's to find that one nugget of information that's never been created in the body of academic knowledge out there. So that's more to kind of the first one or two categories that Brother Chris was talking about. Can you find some new source that's interesting, that adds to the body of knowledge of Masonic education? And that's what inspires me. It's those new things, I've never looked at it through that lens before. And when I try to put together presentations, I try to not just copy and paste the words of Mackey or Pike or anything like that, but I try to provide a new perspective. I try to provide some sort of syncretic view of all these different authors over the ages to try to find some sort of commonality or some sort of new way of looking at the Masonic history or symbolism throughout the year. So that's what gets me excited about Masonic research, is to try to create something new. I've done presentations on, Masonic membership statistics. And yes, all that's out there. That's all in all these Grand Lodge books. But what happens if you put them together and you start, connecting the dots of the data? And that's what I find fascinating. It's taking things that have been out there for hundreds of years and actually generating a gestalt that's greater than the sum of the parts. So that gets me excited. And also as a historian, I love hearing, as Brother Chris alluded to, the real version of history, right? You might hear, George Washington cut down the cherry tree, and then you find out that's not true, and then you're like, oh, my life is a lie, and then you start digging deeper, and you find out that the real history is even more crazy, that it's more,
the
it's more
dollar's
detailed.
not real. Geez.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see the deeper down the rabbit hole you go. Sometimes the more fascinating it is, right? That art imitates life, and so that's also true for Masonic research as well. So find the thing you're passionate about, keep going, go down that rabbit hole, use the resources of your Grand Lodge Research Lodge, your all those other organizations that Brother Chris talked about, and just have a good time, have fun with it, because we're not here to make $1 million. We're here to improve ourselves in Masonry and have a fun time doing that. So with that, thank you very much for watching. See you close to TMR 500 and keep searching for more light. Have a good night.